It's weird how there are more World of Warcraft expansions than Warcraft games. By now the Warcraft franchise is practically a household name, and if you're like me, you may have only played Warcraft 3, but otherwise the series' origins have stayed mostly under the radar. Until that movie. Now, I don't play World of Warcraft, I'm not even really a fan of the Warcraft universe, but I'm a lowly dweeb who likes medieval fantasy and strategy games, so I want to give them a shot. This was originally only going to be about Warcraft 3, but I didn't feel I could accurately judge its gameplay qualities without knowing where it came from. I figured I might as well play them all to see how the series has grown and maybe share what's been lost in the past behind its poor, pixelated time barrier. If you're like me and you know little to nothing about the story and want to learn more about it, then you're in luck because I'll be digging into that as well. If you're trying to avoid spoilers over 20 years later, then you'll be out of luck because I'll be divulging everything these games have to offer. These videos will essentially be game reviews and story exploration rolled up in one. Again, I'm not a fan of the Warcraft universe, so I'm not familiar with the lore or characters, but I know that it is pretty massive. I'll be treating these 3 games as their own self-contained narrative, so if you notice any inconsistencies, don't blame me, blame Blizzard. Without any further ado, however, let's get started with Warcraft, Orcs and Humans.
Welcome to the world of Warcraft.
Warcraft, Orcs and Humans is a FUCK catapults simulator released by Blizzard Entertainment in 1994 for the PC and Mac. Prior to Warcraft's release, Blizzard was really only known for developing some mediocre games for 16-bit systems and making ports for other game studios. Warcraft was their first PC release and by far the most popular game they had developed. The beginning cinematic and opening narration, which you can barely hear by the way, don't really explain all that much besides that the humans and orcs are fighting each other. Like most games back then, the backstory was hidden away in the manuals rather than the game itself. Since it's a bit long-winded and the guide has very few pictures, I'll be providing a full rundown of the story accompanied by my own shitty illustrations. So sit your ass down, because it's story time. Under the reign of King Rin III, who resides in Stormwind Keep, the land of Azeroth was a peaceful and prosperous one. One day, one of Rin's conjurers has an erogenous encounter with a wandering traveler and gives birth to a boy named Medivh. 5 years later, Rin's wife, Varia, cute, gives birth to a son which the game insists is pronounced Lane. When Medivh is about 12, he has a nightmare-induced premonition. Once awake, he goes to his father's chamber and his father inadvertently awakens a dormant power within Medivh. The father, accompanied by 100 clerics, managed to withhold the power within Medivh, but Medivh's father was killed in the process. Medivh, now in a coma, was sent away to Northshire Abbey to be cared for by the clerics and to be kept at arm's length from the kingdom. Turns out, during the mental battle between Medivh and his father, Medivh accidentally opened up a teeny tiny portal between Azeroth and the Orcs' homeworld. The Orcs had complete dominant control of their world and were now fighting amongst themselves in a power struggle. Some of the warlocks discover the portal and convince the other orcs to cease their infighting while they begin to open it further over the course of about 12 years. 1 year after the initial discovery of the portal, they send in a test team, and the orcs discover the new land ruled by weak and prosperous humans, and then begin pillaging their villages. The orcs unify under this new common goal and begin assimilating the new land under their own reign. Back on the human side, Medivh wakes up from his 6-year coma with his powers fully realized and returns to Stormwind to give the now Prince Lane the gift of impending destruction, an hourglass which will empty at the time of King Rin's downfall. And then he just leaves. 6 years later, and the hourglass empties. The orc armies are in full force and siege Stormwind. King Rin dies in the defense while Lane and his mother escape to the Abbey. Lane eventually counterattacks with mounted forces and drives the orcs back using cunning strategy, which the orcs were too stupid to figure out, and were pushed back to the swamps where they had their main encampments. Medivh's mother happens to be a powerful sorceress and returns to find Medivh corrupted by some otherworldly power, but is unable to defeat him on her own. She warns Lane that it would be a pretty good idea to try to kill him sometime in the future before wandering off. The demoralized orc legions were seized by a bloodthirsty war chief named Blackhand, who managed to organize the armies and acted as a supreme leader to the now structured crusades. The orcs and humans now prepare for all-out war. Damn, what a story. I may have the particulars somewhat skewed, the text is a bit vague, but that is the gist of it. I should mention that the human story and the orc story are told by Knight Lothar and the half-orc Garona, respectively. In that respect, it's not impossible for either of them to be misrepresenting certain details or flat-out lying. So future contradictions to the story don't necessarily have to be retcons. Well, I hope you've noticed by now that Warcraft games are very heavily story-based. Without it, the games would just be a bunch of boring battle scenarios with generic soldiers. And also because for this game it helps to know what you're doing and gives context to the characters whose roles would otherwise be unremarkable. I like the story. It's fairly simple, but it does its job well enough and builds a good foundation for the game. So with all that exposition out of the way, we finally get to the game, where you play as a generic soldier leading a small army encampment in a series of boring battle scenarios. Well, you the character aren't really a soldier, but an invisible yet omnipresent general figure ordering your squad to complete certain mission objectives. Fairly standard RTS setup. You rise through the ranks in your respective faction, and although you're unnamed, you do have a significant presence in the story. The first thing you may have noticed is that this game is really slow. Let's see how long it takes for this peon to harvest some gold from the mine conveniently located right next to the base. Okay, so while we wait for that, let's begin the reading for a book report which will recount some of the greatest works of Charles Dickens. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was... yeah, you get it, takes for fucking ever. Alright, before I get too carried away, let's describe what Warcraft is, just in case you couldn't piece it together from the footage I've shown. So it's a real-time strategy game where you play as either orcs or humans. Your goal is to build up your base in order to raise an army, whilst your enemy, who will often sit at the opposite side of the map, does more or less the same thing as you. The further you progress, the more difficult the enemy becomes, the more units the both of you unlock, and the more structures you need to build in order to train said units. The goal of the game is simple: destroy the enemy before they can destroy you. It's a balancing act of constructing your base, defending that base, and attacking the enemy base all at once. Before you can build a base, you first have to finance it. You'll be given a few units and a couple buildings to start off with, but it's up to you to expand it. Using peons or peasants, you can harvest gold and lumber. Once you've accrued the necessary funds, you can send a peon or peasant to build your structure, or you can use it to train more units or research technology. Units require food, so you need the necessary number of farms to accommodate their appetites, and all your structures need to be connected to a road to prevent you from making more than one base. Those are the basics of base building. You can incorporate a higher level of thought for how you arrange your buildings, or if and where you decide to build walls, but the game is pretty easy, so you can get away with just compacting your base to save money. The orcs and humans share almost identical forces, although some units have different abilities. For example, the human cleric can heal units and turn units invisible for a bit, while the orc version, the necrolyte, can raise the dead to fight for them and turn units invincible for a little bit. Where human conjurers can summon water elementals, scorpions, and firestorm, an orc warlock can summon a demon, spiders, and cast poison cloud. Apart from those two examples, the differences between the factions are mostly just minor stat differences, and of course aesthetics. I'd say overall, Warcraft's formula is a successful one. Hell, it spawned 2 sequels. But Orcs and Humans suffers from some gratingly annoying mechanical issues. Firstly is that its pace is so mind-numbingly slow. Simple matches can take upwards of an hour and a half to complete on normal speed. They may not sound like much, but if 90% of that is just... then it feels about 10 times longer than it is. Completing both campaigns can take about 25 hours, with most of that filled with you waiting for your gold to go up, or your units to move from one spot to another, or an enemy to make his way to your archer battery. Hell, even after you've wiped out the enemy forces, it still takes a good 5 to 10 minutes just to destroy their settlement. Do yourself a favor and set the game speed to fast. Utilizing the speed functions is necessary if you want to beat the game before you die of old age. Use the fastest speed setting to hasten up farming gold or destroying bases, and use slower speeds if you're going more tactically and carefully. I like the speed options, but I feel like they're more of a result due to the game's pacing being improperly balanced. The second, and my least favorite part of the game, is that you can only select 4 units at once. If you wanted to amass an overwhelmingly huge army to steamroll your opponent, think again. Even if you select and maneuver all your units quickly enough, the AI is too stupid to attack obvious and immediate threats, and will instead stop at nothing to walk exactly where you told them to, or attack exactly what you told them, and then do nothing else. They will walk to their own slaughter. If you can manage to select and coordinate every single unit to raid as efficiently as possible, then my hat is off to you, because you must have the tactical mind or patience of a god. With only 4 units at your command at one time, you're stuck to slowly advancing your army 4 units at a time until you eventually make your way to the enemy base and begin picking off their reinforcements. This is especially infuriating during the missions where your only objective is to coordinate a small army to dispatch enemies. Constantly flicking your view back and forth across the map just to guide your troops along the same spot feels needlessly tedious. The entire game was voiced by one guy, Bill Roper, which for the human side feels uncanny hearing your mission briefing and all your troops having the exact same voice, and every time you give a unit a command they'll say yes, which gets really old really fast.
Yes. Yes. Yes, my lord. 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 Yes. 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 Yes.
Thankfully, the Orcs have a few more lines and just enough distortion to make it negligible.
What? Stop poking me!
Lastly, the AI in this game is something else as well. If one unit meets another unit, they'll both awkwardly pause and tell each other about their lives and what the weather's like, and then they'll politely let one of them go ahead of the other before resuming their route. Knights will get pelted with arrows as they strive to squeeze out just enough cognitive power in order to figure out how the hell to walk around this one guy in order to start swinging at this other guy. If you want someone to go from one side of a building to another, they will invariably try the path which is already blocked by another unit before slowly turning around to try the other direction. Sometimes units will take the initiative to attack on their own, sometimes they'll just stand there and ask the enemy to stop hitting them. I get that I'm the tactician in all this, but I didn't think I'd have to watch over each and every footstep or sword swing. Now if you can get past that, congratulations, you've officially gone mad, but at least that means you can enjoy the rest of the game, and for the most part, it's a pretty good game. Well, half of it anyway. The game is mission-based. There are 12 missions per campaign. Most of the missions are about building your own base and then destroying the enemy base. They're not all the same though. Sometimes you have to fight against 2 bases, sometimes you're fighting members of your own faction, and sometimes you don't even have a base and need to perform a certain objective with just your troops alone. The missions are all fairly solid. Some of them take a little longer than they need to, some of them feel monotonous and samey, but in general there's nothing wrong with them. They all have a different gameplay twist in some way or another, be it additional units or multiple bases. Unfortunately, once you finish one campaign, the other is almost a perfect mirror. Apart from slightly different units, different scenery, and different music, the campaigns are almost identical. The only difference is that some missions are arranged a little bit differently. Now, they aren't all the exact same missions, but it sure feels like it. You'll be using the exact same strategies as before, and the novelty of playing as the opposing faction lasts only so long. You're essentially playing an additional 7+ hours of the same missions just to see the other half of the story unfold. It's a pity, then, that there is very little story to be had within the game, especially compared to the manual. But I'll go over a quick rundown for each faction. These are the events of what is collectively known as the First War. On the human side, the king makes you a regent and you build some farms. Defend the town of Grand Hamlet and destroy the Orc opposition. Travel into the Swamps of Sorrow and destroy the Orcish outpost of Kairos. One of the kingdom's best knights, Sir Lothar, has gone missing in the Dead Mines when he left on a search for the lost Tome of Divinity. He sends a vision to the Abbot of Northshire requesting help. You and a small party go into the mines and rescue him from 8 million ogres. Secure the Forest of Elwyn and drive out the Orcs who have settled there. A small settlement of humans have been convinced to fight against the Crown and are attacking Northshire Abbey. You rescue the Abbey and dish out justice to the traitors. The village of Sunnyglade is overrun with Orcs, and it's your job to rescue the peasants who have been taken as slaves and then drive the Orcs out of the city. Medivh begins draining the soul out of the land itself from inside his tower. You lead a small party into the tower in order to search him out and kill him. 3 cheers for this random soldier who laid the killing blow. The king orders you to invade the Black Morass, where the Orcs have made one of their main encampments. You go in and destroy them. You're informed that King Lane has been killed by the half-orc named Garona. His last command was to promote you to become the new war leader. Your first act as war leader is to venture further into the Black Morass and destroy one of the Orcs' darkest seats of power, the Temple of the Dam. You siege and destroy the 2 towns of Rockard and Stoneheart. For the final push to secure Azeroth's victory, you destroy all of Blackrock Spire and the Castle of Blackhand. For the human ending, you're recognized by the kingdom as the new heir to the throne and promptly secure yourself as the new king. You hold a party at Stormwind Keep and begin planning on discovering how the Orcs invaded and how to prevent the next invasion altogether. Alright, now for the Orc campaign. Blackhand assigns you to a small outpost to build some farms. Deja vu. Defend a small outpost on the borderlands of the Swamps of Sorrow and destroy the human opposition. Humans have built a formidable base at Grand Hamlet. You're tasked to go in and destroy it. Blackhand's daughter, Griselda, has run off with Turok's band of ogres, and they've hidden themselves in the Dead Mines. You're tasked with destroying Turok's band and killing Griselda as well. When you return from the mines, an outpost at Red Ridge Mountains is being attacked. You go in and defend it and destroy the human settlement responsible. You're ordered to destroy the human town of Sunnyglade. You see a weakness in Blackhand's reign. You seize his own supply lines by destroying the base there. An assembly of Orc warlocks, known as the Shadow Council, recognize your ambition for power and have Blackhand assassinated, thereby promoting you to the position of War Chief. Soon after, you learn that the half-orc Garona has been captured by the humans. In order to obtain her intelligence, you venture into the dungeons of Northshire Abbey and rescue her. You destroy a couple of settlements. You destroy a human soldier training settlement. You destroy the settlements of Goldshire and Moonbrook, which are the last standing oppositions between you and Stormwind. You destroy Stormwind. And for the Orc ending, it says you run your Warblade through the human force's weak leader. It's unclear if this is supposed to be Lane or not, but either by your hand or Garona's, it's safe to say he doesn't survive the First War. In any case, you sit yourself atop the throne and are recognized to be the ruler of this realm and undisputed war chief of the Orcish clans. You begin planning with the Shadow Council to take over more lands and perhaps tamper with the portal further to invade other worlds. So, as you can see, there's very little story in the game, and both endings contradict each other. Overall, they're not bad, and they set up the sequel fairly well. We'll just have to wait to see which ending is canon, if either of them really is. Each campaign only really has one unique mission, so playing both of them can be really exhausting and boring. But despite all my complaints with the gameplay, I still had a pretty good time. When I first started out, I found it difficult to play more than one mission at a time. But as time went on, I found I could go through 2 or 3 in a row, no problem, especially after speeding things up a bit. The game doesn't have too many tracks, but what they did have was fairly catchy, but not so much so that they felt grating after a while. I looked the soundtrack up and found out there was a CD version which had much greater audio fidelity, but honestly I still prefer the chiptune renditions from the game itself. Maybe it's just because I've been listening to them for so long. But anyway, there you have it. That's Warcraft. Extremely flawed, but also extremely fun. The computers are piss easy to beat, but I'm sure against other people there's a lot of room for higher levels of play. It's also worth mentioning that you can play the entire game with just one hand. Obviously, hotkeys help a lot, but if you're restricted to one arm, then it'll accommodate. It has its bumps and cracks, and obvious ways in which it could be improved, but otherwise it's a solid enough first addition to the series. And next time we'll see which direction Blizzard decided to take the sequel. This video ended up being a lot longer than I expected, so thanks for watching.